Welcome to the 9642 podcast. This is your host, Mr. Number 9.
And this is The Fool.
Hello, everyone there. Now, if we were still doing our old style of intros, I might be calling this Welcome to the History and Geopolitics podcast. This is your host, Mr. Number 9.
Yes.
But we're not going to quite go that far. We had intended to do a podcast related to football, maybe a bit of cricket, maybe even rugby. A
Yeah.
multi-sport, and, the world and real life got in the way.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
we are
there's...
going to talk very specifically how the world and real life has affected the Fool's beloved Chelsea Football Club. The biggest news to happen to the Premier League this month is related to the biggest news to happen to the world in the last month.
Yes.
Roman Abramovich, to avoid sanctions, had handed over stewardship of Chelsea to to his charitable fund.
Yes.
Now, have listened to a bunch of podcasts where there is no legal definition of what stewardship is,
Yeah.
which comes down to this is not a power of attorney, this is not a trust with them as directors. There's no such things. They're stewards. They're looking after it. The courts would decide what that means if it ever comes down to an issue like they spent Roman Abramovich's money on things that he wouldn't want to spend it on, for
Yeah.
example, or whether or
Well,
not they are allowed to spend his money if he is sanctioned, for
yeah.
example.
It has gone a step further in the last week because he's now, I think it's last
Yeah,
week, he said he's going to sell now. Though
he is
there's
looking
no,
to sell.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no timeline on that or anything. Though he did say that pretty much all the profit would go to the charitable trust. He wasn't going to take a cent of the profit, which I thought was
Yeah.
pretty cool. But
Yes. So that original vague situation was never gonna fly legal muster, as most even
yeah,
football blogs talked about and said, yeah, not this doesn't mean anything, and I
yeah,
don't think the authorities are gonna fall for it.
no.
And I'm sure Roman Abramovich thought the same,
It
and
was
he's
just
now
try it
decided to
on,
sell it.
right? It was like, let's
Yeah,
see if it would work. Like, is this okay? Like, I still want to be it. I just don't want, you know, this to be a problem.
yeah,
It's still going to be a problem. Fine, I'm selling.
yes. I mean, if in many ways, not saying him personally or uh, Abramovich that is, or Chelsea fans personally, but Chelsea Football Club as an institution are one of the most successful public marketing fronts for the Vladimir Putin and the Russian, rulership, and
Yeah,
because he's probably the most famous yet least known oligarch. There's almost nothing you can tell about Abramovich's life that can be verified other than he used to sell rubber ducks at some
pretty
point,
much.
and that money was enough for him to buy an oil company, supposedly.
Supposedly, yes.
Um,
Yeah,
there's a bunch of rumors and things. This is the story I have heard. You're a Chelsea fan, so you can tell me what you've heard or if anything I said has been contradicted. My understanding is during the Boris Yeltsin era. Do you remember that? You surely remember Boris Yeltsin.
yes, of course.
Um, to our younger readers, he's the first president of Russia, the Russian Federation, after its independence from the Soviet Union.
Hmm.
And that is all I'm really going to say about him because it's so complicated that this will become the history podcast if I go into any more depth than that.
So yeah,
Anyway,
there's a lot of complications there. A lot of complications.
in his regime, during his regime, state-owned enterprises like gas companies, oil companies, etc., were bought by various oligarchs at least what everybody seems to think is very cut prices. Roman Abramovich, supposedly a rubber duck mogul bought a gas company, I want to say, some sort of petrochemical company, and
Hmm.
I could be wrong. It could be an oil company.
I think
Um,
oil, not gas, but I
could
might be
be,
wrong
yeah,
as well.
one
It's
of
one
the
of those two. Yeah.
hydrocarbons. Yeah,
Yeah.
hydrocarbons, energy carbons. He
Yeah.
bought that company for about 100 million in the 90s, which is, yeah, still a lot of money back then. I mean, sure, it's still a lot of money now, but it was more money back then. But
Yeah.
the supposed price for those companies back then were around the $2 billion mark. They're well worth. His holdings are well worth in the tens of billions of dollars now.
Yeah. Definitely.
Suggest so yeah. There's a So basically, from what I've been told, when Vladimir Putin came into power in Russia, he kind of spoke to all the oligarchs in a meeting on a yacht and kind of said, "Look, effectively the previous regime let you steal Russia. So I want you to pay something back to the state, and we're gonna work together. Otherwise, I'm gonna do what Russian leaders do when they have troublesome rich people in their country."
Yeah.
Once again, I'm not getting into a history podcast here. You can Google this stuff. I'm not.
Yeah.
This is very much the pop culture outside influence looking into Russian history. People from Russia can probably tell you much more accurate things, and I'm just only telling you what I have been told and how it's been explained to me by
Yeah.
various sources. And um, a lot of those oligarchs disagreed. A lot of them had to go west with their money and, like, turned over. A bunch of them, after seeing well, how he dealt with various problems plaguing Russia after the collapse of communism, decided, okay, we can still be rich and work with him. And yeah, we've got our current status quo. And Vladimir Putin is one of those people who decided not to shake the boat, not to go up. But he also, now it's very important to mention, he is the only Jewish oligarch in Russia.
Hmm.
So he's not part of the Orthodox Church. He's not part of the old communist system, working in
Yeah.
the party like the others. He is from a minority. Sure, Russian people, Jewish people in the Soviet Union were more integrated than in a lot of other countries. But he's a bit of an outsider, so he decided to. Apparently, the thinking is that he decided to not put all his eggs in one basket. He was like, sure, Putin, I'm totally not going to oppose you, but I'm also going to take a huge bunch of my money and invest it in the West where you can't take it away from me.
Yeah.
And that big investment was football. He was already a football club owner. I believe he owned at least, I don't know if he fully owned it, but he owned at least a part of one of the Moscow clubs.
Cynic,
Um,
I think.
was it Zenit? Okay, it might. If it's Zenit, it's Zenit. But it
Yeah.
was a club that was in the Champions League at the time because he had
Hmm.
to sell those shares because Chelsea qualified for the Champions League.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
Pretty sure it was
was
Zenit, but I might be wrong. Once again, might be wrong, but that's my
Yeah,
memory.
yeah. Once again, there are some facts in here that are gonna be inaccurate, so just
Yeah.
bear with us. Like, this is going off memory and information that
Yeah.
we don't know. But he basically Chelsea was his plan, maybe a plan A and a half, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He never got rid of his oil holdings. He kept he kept not publicly doing anything to undermine the Russian regime, and he also made it really big in the West, buying Chelsea. And I think by all circumstances, Chelsea turned from being a investment to a hobby to a real passion project. I don't
Yeah.
like Yeah, there's not everybody agrees with how he runs Chelsea, and there's definitely problems in their way, but they are one of the best run clubs in world football.
Yeah.
The system of being consistently successful, regardless of the manager and everything. Um, I've always told people that Roman Abramovich didn't revolutionize football in the UK and Europe, full stop, by being the first manager to come in with lots of money. We've always had rich billionaire owners in football
Yeah.
spending lots of money. In fact, Blackburn Rovers did it. AC Milan was owned by Silvio Berlusconi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look him up, Google him. Yeah. He actually existed, young people. He's a real person. None of the things on that Wikipedia page are made up.
No, no, they're not.
That's all I have to say about him. But yes, he did start it. He took over Chelsea, and a lot of people were kind of went, okay, he's a billionaire who bought a relatively big club in London. This is a hobby thing, and a lot of even a lot of like financial analysts were kind of like, oh yeah, you're rich. People buy rich cars and stuff. He's bought a football club.
Yeah,
They didn't think he was gonna make that much money out of Chelsea. Like Chelsea was 200 million pounds in debt when he
yeah,
bought it, and he paid that debt pretty much, and that's what he got to keep Chelsea for. Like he covered Ken Bates's debt.
yeah.
That be right? You know more
Like
about this part of
it
it
was.
than I do.
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, it was covered. I'm pretty sure there was a little bit on top of it, but the main bit was cover the debt, which is yeah. Ken Bates was pretty much. I can't keep
Like,
financing
yeah,
the losses here, so
and
we have to go somewhere, and that was his
I
main problem.
I will point out here that things were very precarious for Chelsea at that point. Like Chelsea had just made it to the Champions League that
Yeah,
season before Roman Abramovich bought the club. Um,
I mean we've been
like,
sitting
and
around.
there's a
We'd
sorry,
say
go on.
with sort of the, I guess,
They hadn't
Tottenham-ish
been in
type
the
thing. Like
Champions League since 1999, from my
no,
memory.
that we've been
And some,
fifth, sixth, seventh, I think, if I remember correctly. Like that was
yeah,
always the
yeah,
sort of thing, maybe eighth. Like we're that sort of club, the not
yeah.
quite
There was a
Champions
lot of
League club, but
issues.
yeah,
Like after you fired Gianluca Vialli after he won the European Cup Winners' Cup,
mm.
then and you were third, by the way.
I know
I
it's
don't
close.
know. I still to this day don't understand why that happened. Um,
No,
and then Ruud Gullit was doing pretty good as well, and you fired him. There's a lot of weird decisions made at that time at Chelsea. Like I
yeah,
cannot explain, but there was crazy money. Like yes, Premiership has crazy money now, but back then they didn't know how to deal with crazy money,
yeah,
and there was crazy money in the Premiership, and then the ITV deal collapsed, and a lot of clubs started going bankrupt. So this history is important to go into to understand Chelsea's situation.
yes, no,
This
very
is why
much.
Chelsea was in a lot of debt. It isn't like sure Ken Bates gets a bad rap for being a terrible owner and stuff. Like Chelsea were in an incredibly horrible position before Ken Bates bought Chelsea. Chelsea
Yeah,
were a club in the second division before the Premier League was out. They look, they were there. That club was giving Millwall a run for its money for being the worst club to attend in hooliganism problems.
yeah, yeah,
So
very much so.
it was they were so it was he turned that all around, made them into a viable business. Um,
Yeah,
bunch of things. So
I know.
there's
I have.
legitimate criticisms of Ken Bates at other clubs. I could definitely agree with, and also in Chelsea. But he
Yeah,
did do a lot of good for Chelsea that allowed it to become the club that Roman Abramovich would consider buying.
yeah, exactly. I think Ken Bates should be given a lot of respect for that. Yeah, you're right. There was issues and things weren't perfect, but I think the thing is that, like Abramovich, Ken Bates cared for Chelsea as a football club,
Yeah.
and that showed in how he cared for it. And I mean, one of the things is the fact that he swallowed up the losses for quite some
Hmm.
time there through the late 90s, early 2000s before he just couldn't do
Hmm.
it anymore and
And
sold
they
to
weren't
Abramovich.
making
So
losses for a while. They were actually they were more or less profitable and sustainable. The
yeah,
losses were sustainable. Like there were losses building infrastructure
oh
that
yeah,
would
yeah.
be profitable later on until the TV deal collapsed.
Well, the
And
problem then is still the same problem now, which is the size of Stamford Bridge. Like
yes.
there, there's only so much they could do then, based on the fact that ticket sales were very much limited. And I mean,
And
it's not a big
also,
stadium.
yeah, I mean, that is one of the big controversies Roman Abramovich has with Chelsea fans at the moment. But we will get down to that a bit later about the ownership of Stamford Bridge. Um, the So at this situation, Roman Abramovich came in, bought Chelsea, covered all their debts. This is before financial fair play, and there was this really fun season. We were like that first season. of Chelsea, we were just like, oh, who's he gonna buy? He got people like Crespo. He got these incredible players to come into the club. Uh,
It
it
was
was like
ridiculous.
playing Football Manager.
It
He was
really
playing
was.
Football Manager at Chelsea. Like that was literally what he was doing.
Yeah,
But that it slowly changed. Like the reason why Roman Abramovich is revolutionary isn't how he came in, but with a lot of money and recovering debts, making a club profit, making bringing a club out of the brink. Because as I said, Ken Brates did that a few decades ago, but before him, a
yeah,
decade and a half before him at Chelsea, at the very same club, and other billionaires used to own football clubs and do ridiculous things.
yeah,
He after a few seasons, turned Chelsea into Chelsea Inc. Like me and the fool here very often talk about how the Chelsea are a Fortune 500 company
yeah,
culture. That's the club they are. They're a Fortune 500 company. They're ruthless. There's nothing's personal. It's all about business and the bottom line and running the club successfully. Like they have an identity. They know the kind of youth products they want. They know the kind of players they want. They know the kind of manager they want. But
yeah.
it's run like a business. You
Yes,
don't
yes.
perform, you go.
Yeah.
Like not every decision is good. There's some terrible decisions made by
Yes.
Chelsea, even post business, like bad contracts, bad hirings. Um, look up Winston Bogard, by the way.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
a real thing.
that
The
was a real thing.
Wikipedia page, not a word of lie. Just saying.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things like that Chelsea can be. Yeah, you could talk about with Chelsea, but he revolutionized the structure and how you could run a modern day football club. And the fact that Roman Abramovich turned a club that was probably not worth the 200 million he paid for it. Chelsea at that point was probably worth maybe half of that, if
Maybe,
I'm
yeah.
not being unfair. Like, because they didn't own Stamford Bridge, by the way. They
Still
didn't.
don't
It's
own
not like
Stamford
Manchester
Bridge.
United that owns Old Trafford and the land around it and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, it's a
It's not
completely
like
different.
Manchester. Hmm?
So yeah, it's a completely different organisation, pretty much, that owns Stamford Bridge. And in fact,
Yeah.
Chelsea are only allowed to play as Chelsea at Stamford Bridge because of the grace of the um, Stamford Bridge Owners Association,
Yes.
whatever it's called. But yeah, it's owners.
Yes. And there's a bunch of things why Chelsea were not as valuable.
Mm,
He converted that into a business that he values now at 3 billion. Which I am not a financial expert, but that's not too far off, I would think. I don't think that's an unfair price for a club like Chelsea. That's a ready-made winning club that is going to earn you 100 to earn you around $500 million a year
yeah, I don't think
in
it's
revenue.
too unfair. I think I had heard
Not profit, but revenue.
yeah, I'd heard 2.5 ish beforehand. So three, if that's what he's valuing it to sell, that was the pre-selling bit. If that's what he's valuing it to sell,
Yeah,
I don't think that's too far off. Like that's a fair enough price to be like, this is what I want for it.
yeah,
Yeah, that's uh, probably about what it's worth, give or take a little bit. I mean, at least that's a good starting
yeah.
offer to say I want something around here. So
So that's the model, and that's the reason people like Kroenke bought Arsenal. That's the reason why people like Sheikh Mansour has bought Manchester City,
mm,
and the owners of PSG. You can just go because the model is proven. Like
yeah,
football can print money because people can't live without football.
I would
It
almost
it may as well be water, food, internet, football,
yeah.
and that's fair. Not necessarily in that order, by the way.
I would almost say that the Man City purchase by Sheikh Mansour is directly influenced by Roman Abramovich's purchase of Chelsea. If that
Yeah.
hadn't gone ahead or hadn't gone the way it did, I don't think that ever would have happened. Like,
Absolutely. And I think Manchester City, I think you could argue, won the lottery twice because Manchester held the Commonwealth Games in 2005, I want to say.
2006, I
Six,
think.
2006.
Six?
Uh,
Yeah, it must have been
yeah,
2006.
so they held the Commonwealth Games, and that stadium, City of Manchester Stadium, would need a tenant, and obviously Manchester United don't need to move their stadium. So
Yeah,
Manchester City were going to move there, so they sold Main Road and moved to moved to Manchester City, and the and then they've got a very favorable lease. So the city of Manchester
Yeah.
still own the city of Manchester Stadium, but they have a very favorable lease, and I think it's like a 150-year lease that Manchester City have there.
Something,
Um,
yeah, like
but
that. Yeah.
but they don't get the advantages that Manchester United have. So like any concerts or other games being hosted in, like if the Glaziers were smart and decided they wanted to host NFL games in Manchester and do the necessary upgrades in Manchester at Old Trafford, they would be getting that money
Yeah.
at they would be getting those earnings, those broadcast money and all that stuff. Manchester City, if they did that at the City of Manchester Stadium, the City of Manchester gets that money. They don't, Manchester City don't own the stadium
Yeah.
to do that. So that's one of the disadvantages that they have. Obviously, match day revenue, the city, I believe, gets a portion of that to cover their expenses.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's basically their lease rates. But I don't know the ins and outs of it. But to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the disadvantage and advantage of not owning your own stadium. Um, the Now, another interesting thing to point out is Chelsea, by the barest of margins, made fourth. That's the season
Yeah.
before Roman Abramovich bought and they had missed out on fourth three times in a row to Bobby Robson's Newcastle.
Yeah.
Bobby Robson uh, got fired in the middle of the season because it looked like they were going to finish fifth. And I still believe to this day that that was a big mistake
Yeah.
um, by Newcastle United, because I think if he had stayed on, Bobby Robson would have turned the squad around and got them to fourth. Freddie, and there's a lot of players from Newcastle in that era who say they regret their behavior and how they played and their attitude because it got Sir Bobby fired. And like Sir Bobby is one of the GOAT managers, very underrated. I think his achievements in football are not fully appreciated by a lot of people because he was from a while back and a lot of it is from the 70s and 80s. But he managed for a long time in a lot of different clubs and
Yeah.
in a lot of different contexts,
Yeah.
and both international and club level. Um, if he had managed to get Newcastle fourth and Roman Abramovich had bought Newcastle United, you can bet your bottom dollar he's not Claudio Ranieri. He can handle egos. He was a
Yeah.
manager at Barcelona. He was a manager uh at at PSV. He is used to managing big clubs.
Yeah.
He was
Exactly.
England manager, and he has that respect and gravitas. So he wouldn't have had any issues with any of the big players they wanted to buy, and he would have been happy to have big players. Like he is from that romantic era of football. Who's like, you're giving me good players, I will get the best out of them. I back myself,
Yeah. Exactly.
and he would do it.
Yeah.
Like he is also like, ironically, his protege Jose Mourinho would do that at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Jose Mourinho, I should say Jose. My
Jose.
apologies, but yes, Jose Mourinho did that at Chelsea. So you know that the man can spot talent. That's all I need to say about that. So
Yes.
it would have been like there's a very interesting alt history timeline you could think of where Newcastle gets that Chelsea, gets a lot of that Chelsea money, and maybe, you know, last we would be talking about Saudi Arabia buying Chelsea now.
Yeah. Maybe. It,
Um, it's hard to see because I don't know how long Ken Bates could have kept owning Chelsea. Like they would have been fifth. I don't know if they would have. They could have gone the Leeds route very easily.
very
Uh,
easily, and actually quite likely. I think Ken Bates probably could have held out for another season or two, maybe, but that was going to be it, and then there was going to be real trouble at that point. Um,
yes, but
and I don't know.
Chelsea already had set up their youth system and had a bunch of good players.
Yeah,
They would have sold a lot of players at decent prices to
yeah,
keep the
I
books going, I
yeah.
think.
That's what I mean. There would have
They
been real
might not have
problems.
gotten relegated, but they might have become maybe more of a West Ham club, maybe
Yeah,
be a club that kind of finishes mid-table, no longer competes at the top anymore until a rich owner comes along.
Yeah, we,
to give them the spending power because they don't have the assets that Arsenal have. They don't have a big
mm,
stadium back like the way Arsenal has a big stadium now. Back in the day, yes, Arsenal's and Chelsea were competing at the same level in
yeah,
terms of stadium sizes, but once the Emirates came online, Arsenal were going to be like the mega club of London
yeah, yeah,
if Abramovich hadn't come to the scene.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And maybe if Arsenal could have, managed their stuff a bit better, but that's a
Yeah,
different story
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. There's a different story there as well. But it changed like I said, the landscape was changed and it's gonna change again. So
Mm.
enough of a nostalgic look to the past. What who do we know are actual legitimate contenders for buying Chelsea at
That's
the
the thing
minute?
is I haven't seen any actual people who it is, so it's unknown really. Um,
So
that's so I guess what mega oil baron out of the Middle East is left. Um, Seems to be
sure,
it.
a mega oil baron out of the Middle East could be. I mean, Saudi Arabia's got a team, Qatar's got a team, the
Mm.
UAE have a team. Maybe Dubai will, the Sheikhs of Dubai or the Sheikhs of or the or King of Kuwait.
Oh, I did forget one name that got thrown out, um,
But
which some friends at work were thing, which is apparently Conor McGregor is interested in buying Chelsea, which seems wrong to me on so many levels.
he's a Manchester United fan. Why is he trying
Yeah,
to buy Chelsea?
that's why it's wrong on so many levels. I don't know why he's trying to, but it's one of the names on the list is Conor McGregor. Had forgotten about it. There's a couple of
Right.
consortiums. Um,
Chelsea is a worthwhile asset to procure. They're very
yeah,
profitable and they there's going to be bids, but right now obviously the world economy is not the best. There's not just but there rich people have more money to spend now. Ironically, the 1% have grown richer in COVID
yeah,
times. I think almost 6 times the gap has grown
yeah, something
between
like that.
the 1% and the 99%. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not an economics guy, by the way. Like, don't
yeah,
quote me on that. But so there's definitely potential owners. Like I know LeBron James is affiliated with FSG, so he already owns Liverpool. Because LeBron James is one of the first, I believe, the first athlete to become a billionaire from his salary alone.
all right, yeah,
Officially. Like there are other sports people now, like Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, who are also billionaires, but it's not from their salary.
yeah, yeah. It's
Or
all the
maybe
other
he's
stuff,
the first sports person to have earned $1 billion in salary over his lifetime
something like that. Yeah, that
already
covers.
over his sport career, but something incredible like that. And he owns his own agency for players, and he owns his own sneaker line because he didn't do the Michael Jordan thing of aligning with Nike and make it, doing something with them. That was his own. He basically went, I'm going to do my own thing from bottom
Yeah,
up. He owns the supply chain. That's his model for being a successful entrepreneur with his
yeah,
sport, like leveraging his sport. Which is why I think he would be a successful owner of any sports team. Um, if there are rumors that the NBA are looking to expand, and one of the franchises are going to be in Seattle, and one of them are going to be in Las Vegas. Basically, it's free money because they're $2 billion franchise fee for each. So
yeah,
the other owners are like, sure, we have to divide up the pot of TV earnings and they can make a thing of like those two teams don't get a share of the TV earnings for the first 2 or 3 years because you're supposed to be building the franchise
yeah,
before you cut into the profits of the league, and that there's precedent for that. So they don't have to start sharing immediately. But $2 billion split 30 ways, like upfront, $4 billion split 30 ways upfront. I think then
yeah,
and then after that you're dividing up your earnings Mm.
Yeah.
That seems like a no-brainer to me. And people are interested in paying that sort of money because this is the franchise fee, by the way, not the so just the rights to own a franchise. After that, they have to spend their own money building it up, doing all the other things
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to get it up and running. Um, it's so yeah, so he's most likely gonna end up buying a basketball team because the NBA want there to be another owner, who's African American, and probably want to do what they did with Michael Jordan, who owns a team in the NBA as well.
Yeah,
Like, have the goats own teams and stuff like that. And he's already owns a sport team in Liverpool, like a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
decent share. So yeah, he's already in the business, so he's out unless he decides to sell his Liverpool shares and other things, and decides to buy
Maybe.
Chelsea with a group of
It,
rich people. Because I'm not saying he would have enough money on his own, by the way, but the whole I could be the front guy who's the entrepreneur person who shows up to games and wants to win and go, and becomes somebody who buys stuff. You know,
yeah,
and then we have actual billionaires supporting other billionaires supporting me.
yeah,
There is obviously always tech giants. You never know. Bill Gates might be. Bill Gates, I think, might not be. He's
it,
already had opportunities, but Steve Ballmer already owns
yeah.
the
It
Golden
looks like
State.
a billionaire out of New um, LA Dodgers part owner. So that's I think it is Todd Bowley.
Todd Bowley, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a.
he's apparently tried to buy Chelsea 3 years ago for 2.2 billion. So seems likely he'd probably be in there. Does say
Yeah, Todd Bowley
doesn't
for an American owner. The
yeah
Dodgers consistently have one of the highest paid payrolls in the league. So he is not afraid to throw money to win stuff. To be fair, the LA Dodgers are like one of the, like it's a Los Angeles institution, so that doesn't matter. They'll always have fans going to their games,
yeah
and
yeah
they'll always make the playoffs because they have really good players and their games are on prime time, etc., etc. It's a thing in America where if you're from a big market, you're gonna do well. If he ends up buying Chelsea, could be interesting. An American
seems
owner, but he is less like the owners of Liverpool, who are more Moneyball and analytics driven. But not to say he isn't, because every owner is now in American sports.
yeah
But he's also not afraid to outcompete the analytics driven people for price.
yeah yeah. It looks
To
like he's the well him leading a consortium with Hans-Jörg Wyss, which is a Swiss billionaire, seem to be things, but it does suggest they don't share Abramovich's $3 billion um,
Yeah.
asking price. So
And that might, like I said, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the
yeah,
imagination, and they might think like it's worth it for us at this price, maybe 2.5, but it's not worth it for us at 3 billion. And for all we know, Raymond Abramovich might have just gone like, yep, this is the thing, so that I know the low balls are only going to come from this point, and we can meet somewhere in the middle
yeah, yeah.
to end up with something
So yeah,
here.
so that seems to be most likely one. There is Britain's richest man, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, is apparently
He
interested. He
he
wants to buy a Premier League club, but he also believes they're
I know he
overpriced.
wants to buy
So
a Premier League club, but I thought he categorically said he's not going to buy Chelsea.
I know he's on the list that I found on Google. Um, but
There's always rumors about him wanting to buy a Premier League club, and he
yeah,
does want to, but he strikes me as somebody who maybe is happy to buy a championship club and
yeah,
bring them up slowly to the Premier League, or even like League One, League Two club.
yeah,
Because getting into the Football League is really hard. There's only one spot that gets into the Football League.
yeah,
Um, as Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney has mentioned, like it's one of the toughest promotions to earn, as they're learning in Wrexham,
yeah,
um, and they're kind of basically focusing on building up infrastructure, getting all the things in place, so that when they do get into the football league, they don't get relegated immediately. Like I think that's their goal.
Yeah, yeah,
So I do think buying uh, a non-league club to try and push up, very difficult. I
yeah,
don't think that's more viable for someone like a Ryan Reynolds, who's not a billion, billions and billions of dollars person.
yeah,
He's a good entrepreneur in his own right, because he owns the Grey Goose Gin and a bunch of other brands which he's kind of set up and built by himself. So he does know how to get, and market and earn money for Wrexham.
yeah,
But yeah, well, at the end of the day, he said that he's not interested in running the day-to-day football stuff. He wants to leave the people who know football in charge of doing football.
yeah, yeah,
And he's like, yeah, we want, our ambition is to get back into the football league, but we understand that it's difficult. Like, it's gonna take time. Um, the
The other one that might be a bit more of a definite, which is once again American, is Thomas Ricketts, the chairman of the Chicago Cubs. Apparently, he's looking for investment opportunities outside the US. Tried to buy AC Milan in 2018, failed. So the other one there at least hasn't. All the other ones, like you say, Ratcliffe
well,
is sort of
Thomas
like, I don't
Ricketts,
really want a Premier League club, but
and I think also the owner of Manchester United, the Glaziers, tried to buy an IPL club when they expanded.
yeah,
So they are looking to expand. Obviously, the Glaziers already own Manchester United. They can't buy Chelsea, and I don't think they're looking to sell Manchester United to buy Chelsea.
no,
That would be dumb. Um, at least from my perspective, I don't see why you would do that. Now, there's obviously other billionaires around the world who are
mm,
football fans who could definitely, like, billionaires from Asia, billionaires from Africa, Latin America,
yeah,
all over. But there's a group of usual suspects people, you think, like people who already own a sports franchise. It would be interesting if Chelsea were bought by somebody like Jerry Jones, who's the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, who's
yeah,
literally basically, has gone from being an oil mogul to literally being like, yeah, football is my life's work and that's all I care about now. Now, I don't know if that would work, but I think that would be really interesting.
yeah. That would be quite interesting, really. It would, yeah,
And he would probably then try and push the expansion of an NFL franchise um into America, to London.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and with that being said, speaking of NFL owners in London, Shahid Khan would probably have bought Chelsea for 3 billion.
yeah,
Shahid Khan is currently one of the richest owners in football.
yeah,
He's one of the richest NFL owners, I believe. He may be the richest NFL owner after, in terms of his, because he's like a car manufacturing mogul. And he owns a bunch of, media stuff. He owns a wrestling company as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah. By the way, you guys dodged a bullet by not having him own. Sorry, a billionaire with that much wealth should never allow their club to get relegated. I'm sorry, Fulham fans. That's just the truth.
It is the truth.
Like,
It's
Fulham are a club in an area with a catchment and a great stadium and all the things. Like, if once they're in the Premiership, they should be generating enough money with that financial fair play should always allow them to compete and
yeah,
stay in the
exactly.
Premiership, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a reason why the Jacksonville Jaguars consistently suck. That's just that's just what it is. It would be, I feel like you guys could even end up with something interesting, like one of the IPL owners,
mm,
buying Chelsea. Someone like Ambani, who owns the Royal Challengers Bangalore, or even Shah Rukh Khan, who owns. the Kolkata Knight Riders, if
Oh
that
yeah.
group, because they own a bunch of cricket teams, if they
Yeah.
decided to ever expand outside of cricket, because I believe he's also ended up buying, he may partially own Atletico de Kolkata Mohan Bagan. They're
Okay.
just Mohan Bagan. Nobody cares about the Atletico de Kolkata part because Mohan Bagan are like a 120 year plus footballing institution.
All right. Yeah.
They're yeah, yeah. So he owns, I believe he owns part of it with Sachin Tendulkar
Ah.
and Saurav Ganguly. So him and his rich cricket and acting Bollywood friends and Bollywood money, God knows where that comes from. Like honestly, I don't know. There's always rumors about how close um the illegal money trade in India is linked to Bollywood, like to
Yeah.
use to launder money into Bollywood. I don't know how true it is, but it's always a rumor. Um, and this is by no means me saying people like Shah Rukh Khan and all of them are involved in any of that, but yeah, they are the face of the money who owns the Kolkata Knight Riders.
Yeah.
And if he did end up purchasing purchasing Chelsea, because I could even see him look to invest in one of the county cricket clubs because at the moment the ECB are not looking to sell the franchises in the hundred. The hundred was relatively successful, but
Yeah.
you know those counties own themselves, their members. He can easily go, hey, I'm happy to own like 40% to fund money into you. And
Hmm.
like whether it's Surrey, Essex or Surrey, most likely Surrey because they're one of the biggest cricket clubs in the country.
Yeah.
Um, and the Oval is like this, storied ground,
Yeah. Yeah.
historical ground. So yeah, Chelsea, and yeah, it fits with the whole. Yeah, I'm doing a cricket business and a football business, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that could be an interesting owner as well. And the after a shaky start, the KKR are one of the successful franchises in cricket. Even the owners of the Mumbai Indians, who are the most successful cricket franchise
Yeah.
in the world and the best run, um, could look to do it. So there's there's plenty of sports owners. But yeah, I think the era of how Abramovich ran, this is assuming a sale goes through. Like, obviously, we all hope hostilities in the Ukraine end quickly,
Yeah.
and what economic pain that regular people in Russia are going through from the sanctions and stuff can end. Even if that all happens quickly, I don't think any of the people who are considered to be part of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, like Roman Abramovich, are
Yeah.
are gonna lose their sanctions anytime soon.
No.
Even
No.
in the best
Exactly.
case scenario, from that outcome.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think even if the everything hostilities all stopped tonight
Yeah,
and Russia fell back, I think the sanctions
yeah.
on Putin and the inner circle will probably persist for quite some time. So yeah, and Abramovich would be caught up in that, I would say. And even then, even if for some strange reason those were dropped, I still don't think it would be possible for Abramovich to continue to own a English football club, um, just
Wait,
on
well,
the public backlash of it.
it only depends on how long the idea and how separate the charitable trust can act
Yeah,
from
it. I think it also that model would really depend on the public perception. They could perceive that yep, he is actually not gaining from this, then maybe it would be okay. Um,
There's going to be a lot of investigation
yeah, oh,
into
so much.
corruption and collusion with Russian money in London, and that
Mm,
thing is coming. I don't think, and like I said, even if I'm not in any way a political expert. I'm just going off what I've seen in the news,
Yeah,
and similar to how we mentioned about embargoes of the oligarchs, the whole inner circle. Even if the war were to end tonight somehow, as you mentioned, the economic embargo on regular people in Russia was to be lifted, or at least eased
yeah,
for their sake. The oligarchs are not getting off, and I do think this investigation of how much actual money the Russian state has in London and in big business in London is gonna get through because I don't. It seems politically impossible for it to not go through now,
yeah,
based on
exactly.
public reaction to what's happening. Um, so it's a very, I find, based as somebody who lives in a country with a lot of who was born in a country with a lot of corruption and how these things work. I would find it very, very difficult to believe that Roman Abramovich has not invested money in political parties and other
Oh,
things, and that
almost
money is going to
guaranteed.
be traced back into the charitable fund, and this is why it needs to be sold.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the while it wouldn't be fair to Chelsea fans, the if the government has to freeze Chelsea's money and assets, and they're forced to sell players and whatnot,
it could
then yeah,
happen.
it could happen.
Exactly.
Um, the It could even be taken over. They could even be quote unquote forced into a situation where it's like a receivership, and you have a government agency running Chelsea
Yeah,
till it's sold. So they're like, we are keeping an eye on every dollar and cent
yeah,
used here. The people in charge of the board who do the football decisions maybe will be kept because they don't want the asset to stop making money because obviously they want to make as much money as possible selling it and they want it to keep being profitable. But we're making sure all the profits go into the club, go nowhere else, and it's only being used in this particular way, and where all the money coming into the club is going. And that's a very real possibility. So in which case, like nobody's buying Chelsea
yeah. Well, that's
at that.
the the problem is those sort of things are some of the reasons why there's it's
Mm,
potential that selling Chelsea may actually be quite hard. Is that
mm.
there's worry about the UK government doing something in the meantime. In which case, what does that mean for buying it? Is it better to wait until that happens and see what might get it cheaper that way? But there's also the issue about how do they actually pay the money, because Abramovich has been facing sanctions and assets being frozen and everything all over the place. Like, how does the money get from whoever wants to buy
Would
it through
they
Abramovich to the charitable trust which he wants to go? Like, how do they do it properly so that it actually is all legal and everything as well? So it's a bit of a
would they consider going a socio model where
hmm.
they effectively sell the club to fans
And
and basically
the
go,
Chelsea
yep.
pitch owners would very much want that. That would
If they're happy to let the pitch owners buy the club on HP, quote unquote,
yeah,
here interest-free loan to buy Chelsea, which they slowly use the money Chelsea generate to buy the club.
yeah,
I'm just spitballing here. I'm not saying this
yeah.
is viable or a thing that can actually happen.
It'd be very interesting.
And then the Chelsea Pitch Owners Association, like expand their membership. There's plenty of people in London and stuff who are members of that organization,
Yeah.
quote. And to be fair, they feel like, to me, the natural people to buy the club. And
Hmm.
in a situation like that, where it's a government takeover of the club into receivership, um, given the political situation, the government may be forced in the end to be like, look, this is the most politically expedient owner.
Yeah.
Um, we're not in it to make money. It's not like these guys owe us back taxes and stuff. So it's not a real receivership.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is a this
It's a
is a
political
different
thing.
situation.
Yeah,
It's a different situation. So we are effectively taking an asset and forcing a sale
yeah,
to a party that we're happy with.
exactly.
And now,
And it's, as I say, the
even if the
PLO
club,
would
even yeah, like
that.
even if the pitch owners were like they only get to buy 51% of the club, and the rest is like they can put up into shares in the
Mm,
stock market and raise money that way. That would, the famous 50 plus one model
yeah,
from the Bundesliga. That would be an interesting precedent set.
yeah, it would be very interesting, and it's something the CBO have been trying for a while. Like that's their threat of legal action to do something like that anytime, all the time through when Abramovich and Chelsea were trying to find a way of increasing the stadium size, moving to Battersea or something like that, because um, they were trying to negotiate keeping the Chelsea
Hmm.
club name and the shirt and all the rest, but not being at Stamford Bridge, and that was, you know,
Yeah,
the
that's
pitch owners association just was not no, and but that was their fight back, was if they
because I
tried to move,
believe
then
the
they
pitch
would.
owners own the name Chelsea and the
Yes.
logo Chelsea
Oh,
as well.
yeah. So well, it's, I don't know if ownership's the right word, but it's a legally bound terms that Chelsea Football Club, a team called Chelsea Football Club, can only play at Stamford Bridge, or that the team playing at Stamford Bridge is legally called the Chelsea Football Club and has the Chelsea logo. So if they moved away
Yeah.
from Stamford Bridge, that's been the bigger problem, is that they've had to negotiate. It's not that they can't buy the land, though that was also a problem. It's not that they can't build on the land, although there was also resource consenting type things that were issues. The biggest issue was being able to call the team that played there Chelsea. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, and that's just been
And
blocked. And
in
they
that
almost
situation,
got to a place on that, but then it fell over and stuff. And
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's it's a difficult relationship between the
mm,
two entities, and if that entity does end up owning Chelsea, given that legal situation, like I can't see an American owner standing for that.
no, it'll be a lot
Like,
more interesting if it's American owner, because yeah,
like
they won't understand it.
there's certain things in like people from the old world, quote unquote, like Asia, Eurasia and Africa, the where okay, these are laws from feudal eras that haven't been repealed. It's just the way it is. We go, okay,
Yeah,
that's just the way it is. There's a grandfather in the Constitution or things
mm,
saying this law's been around for too long. We can't change it now without like destroying everything.
yeah,
And like you and I know because we're either engineers or failed engineers in my case because we know how systems work.
yeah.
Um, this so like something like a law like that is something that I think Abramovich can tolerate. The whole thing with Manchester City is something Sheikh Mansour can tolerate because he's not looking to get into maximizing income from his stadium.
Yeah.
If like that's not his goal. Disclaimer. Okay, Mr. Number 9 here. Asterisk zone.
Asterisk zone, asterisk, woo, woo, woo. News updates.
All right. So when we originally recorded the podcast, which was yesterday, and
Yeah,
today is the 11th of March, and we recorded this on the 10th of March, and literally about maybe less than 3 hours after we had finished recording and gone to sleep, um, the UK government put sanctions on Vladimir Putin. A lot of what we discussed below does consider sanctions, but
yeah,
obviously at the time we were discussing it, sanctions were not on the table. But I believe both me and the fool were assuming that sanctions were coming. But
yeah. I
that
think
being said, we have a lot of information regarding these
yeah,
sanctions now and what
there.
they entail.
Yeah, our previous discussions were around what sanctions might look like, and yeah, now Abramovich is actually, along with seven other oligarchs based in the UK or with UK businesses, have all been slapped with actual sanctions. So Yeah, it sort of changes things a little bit, though
Um,
also not. So
yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in our podcast we recorded yesterday, and it's already a bit hazy in my mind. We haven't had a chance to listen. I haven't had a chance to listen to the recordings. So this may sound jumbled, but or business as usual.
yeah,
I did mention that I felt that sanctions were coming regardless of what the what was happening to in the war situation on the ground because the
yeah,
political winds had blown a particular way and they couldn't be taken back now.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so with that being said, yeah, the Chelsea sanctions, they're very interesting.
Hmm.
No merchandise sales, no ticket sales,
Yeah,
no away fans. I guess that means at their stadiums only season ticket
th-
holders and people who have pre-purchased tickets can go and
yeah.
buy there. They have been only given a budget of 20,000 for away
Away game.
travel,
I know,
so for away games, which sure, inside England might be fine, but
but yeah,
Chelsea tend to use a private jet to travel and take all their staff and everything.
yeah.
So that would be a significant downgrade on their travel budget.
It's going to be interesting because we're meant to travel to Lille next week for Champions League.
I
Yeah,
don't think that's going to be an issue. I think
yeah,
all the um, expenses like your stay, accommodation, travel plans had already been paid for at least a week
yeah.
ago, not
That's a good
earlier.
point. It's probably
And so
okay,
that's
but
already probably been arranged. I would be very surprised if Chelsea hadn't yet sorted that out.
you make a good point. It's
But
probably already
I
paid.
think
But
I
the
think that
quarterfinals
will
could
be
be
fine.
interesting then.
But yes, quarterfinals could definitely be interesting. You don't know where the away fixture will be. Um, yeah, they could continue playing staff and players,
Hmm.
and continue deals that have already been pre-made, but nothing can continue. So
Yeah,
yeah,
which also means no trans at this point in time, no transfers
or
or
no new
loans.
contracts
Yeah, no
at
new
all.
contracts at all. Yeah, nothing. So
So
which puts our three, well, all our defense in even more question marks than they were, since Rudiger up for um, negotiations. Christensen, who I think signed for Barcelona now. So there's
there's
that.
a very
Plus
real
Aspilicueta and
possibility.
Silva.
Yeah, there's a very real possibility because a lot of the avenues they have for generating money are not available to Chelsea.
Hmm.
They may have to actually go into receivership with the government to keep running the club because they're a club that's about, wants to be sold and things like that.
Yeah.
So if that were to be the case, I believe that's a 9-point deduction in the
Yeah.
Premier League.
Which is not. I'm hoping. I do know that Chelsea has put an appeal or a letter to the
Yeah,
government, basically, hey, can we actually just run our club, please? Like, yeah, we know where the money came from, but let's just earmark it
I
as
think
not going there now.
while while I understand where they're coming from,
Mm.
I would be very surprised if the government loosened restrictions,
I would be surprised too. I
especially
would.
for earnings, because we are fairly sure most of the Chelsea is a money laund it's a sports washing enterprise for Roman Abramovich in many ways. Like
Oh
it's
yes.
more than that, but that's its main financial thing. It's a financial instrument Roman Abramovich used for sports washing.
Yeah.
Um, and the situation here, I would be very surprised. And also, like, I think the government are under a lot of pressure. So politically, this is where they can win points by being tough on an oligarch and things like that.
Yeah.
This does, I think, like I've been thinking about this for a few hours, and I don't know what you've been like. I think this is your opportunity, Chelsea fans, CTS, sorry, CST, CPO, Chelsea Pitch Owners,
Yeah.
Chelsea Supporters Trust. Go in there, put in a proposal to the government. Just be like, look, why can't we be in charge of the club?
Yeah.
We run it. We run all the avenues for earning money go to us. We take over. Mr. Once you figure out the sanctions situation, Mr. Abramovich can decide whether to. He was planning to give not take any of the money and donate it to
Yeah.
charity anyway. At this stage, nobody's buying Chelsea, I don't think, with these
No.
sanction issues, and I think there was already problem for potential buyers to consider with the whole Chelsea pitch owners and the naming rights situation for Chelsea
Yeah.
Football Club because the with the CPO. Um, so there are yeah at the moment people are saying that they're still just as interested, and I'm sure they're not lying because
Yeah.
sanctions were a very real possibility when these bids came in. But that $3 billion price that I think was never realistic to
No. No.
expect in this market. Then now I think even 2 billion is unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like with this like they've effectively got a transfer ban for the next window if this can't be sorted out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people, it's very difficult to understand what happens with people on loan. Now, FIFA has been asked to do like open up a new transfer window for people who are impacted by the conflict in Ukraine, for
Mm.
UEFA, I mean, and I believe that will happen for humanitarian reasons, if
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing else. For especially like if you're a player from country in Africa, playing in the Russian second or third division,
Yeah.
Ukrainian second or third division, you probably legitimately want to leave but still earn a living, and it would be grossly unfair if you weren't able to just go and be a footballer somewhere else. Like this is
Yeah. Yeah.
like I understand rules are rules, but UEFA I think will have to kind of um
Either
get
make an exception or you say open a full transfer window, but or do something. It seems
open
only
a
right.
transfer window for people, and I think this would count as like players affected by the Ukrainian crisis because of the
Yeah.
economic sanctions. Like people like Chelsea's loan army have to understand what's their situation. Can they now? Because the club the license to run only lasts till May.
Yeah.
After that, assuming they had generate enough money to pay players, because at some point, if they cannot pay players, they will have to end contracts of like, look, we can't continue this
Yeah.
contract.
Exactly.
Like, this is not just the players whose contracts are up at the end of the season. I'm meaning before the season, people who have long-term
Yeah. Yeah.
contracts, and
Exactly.
that's
If
the
we can't
only
pay.
fair solution.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know if they can earn money. They can't force a player on their books to go, yeah, sure, I'm gonna stay. You can't go and find another club. They're entitled to go find their employment,
Mm.
and they can't make a transfer deal with another club, so they can't even sell those players. Like this is obviously a worst case scenario. I don't think this is where it will get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I said, because there is or there are organizations like the CPO and the
ETF.
CST, who I
Yeah.
think, yeah, uh, Chelsea Supporters Trust, CST, are they or
CST.
CTF?
CST. Yeah.
Yes,
No. Yeah.
CST.
CST. Sorry. Yes.
Yes,
That's the Supporters Trust.
they could very easily become like custodians of the club, keep it
Mm.
running, at least be allowed to sell merchandise, sell tickets, and earn
Yeah.
their broadcast money to pay for stuff. If um, even if that means they can't get any money from Roman Abramovich and things like that.
Yeah.
The legal situation, so it's not a charity run and owned by Roman Abramovich that is the quote unquote steward of the club, because that has no legal meaning. A
Yeah.
custodian has a legal meaning and a legal definition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think that's
and
like that does sound like the best interim solution. Is there
yeah,
are two organisations set up which are Chelsea fans, which have vested interest in the club. One of them has actual proper interest in the club in the pitch
yeah,
owners association, and the supporters trust is very much part of that as well. So it seems a good place. Like let's all ownership just goes to them. They are the ones, so the money's going to them. Not they're not in any way connected to Abramovich. So now we can break that up. the sale can still go through. The
Yeah.
money proceeds still get to go to an appropriate charity. All they have to do is name that charity. I think would probably be how that would
Yeah.
go. Like this is
Even
the
if they
charity
bought
that's going to the money's going to go into, and it's going to this is its.
Even if they were to buy it for not 3 billion, like say 500 million, because I don't know if the supporters trust or the pitch owners
Well, I would
association has
imagine
that huge amount of a war chest. Even if they're allowed
no.
to borrow about $500 million pounds, for example,
The way
to
I
buy
see it
Chelsea.
is more that Abramovich gives them that on the conditions that they are just custodians for the sale. So he cuts tight because he
Right. So
doesn't
you
like
think
he's not
they
meant to
would
take it.
sell it?
They would sell
You
it
don't.
on. They wouldn't keep it. No, because I don't think we can. They could have enough financial clout to run it ongoing as a super club. Um,
You would think so, but we have Bayern Munich, Real Madrid,
I
and
know we do have
Barcelona.
examples, and maybe it would work.
I think
But,
Chelsea in England alone have enough fans that could do it. If
mm,
we like Bayern Munich has 300,000 members. Sure, they're not just a football club. They have a bunch of other sports and people. It's all over Bavaria, but I
yeah,
think if you go to Chelsea's international fan base and basically started opening up slots for membership, and like the CPO always encouraged people to buy shares um, in their organization. So if there
yeah,
was a club, quote unquote, that owned about uh, say even like 30% of the club, and the CPO and the CPO owned another 30%. They still have the option of floating like 40% of Chelsea in the stock market
yeah,
as shares for raising capital.
yeah. I mean
Um,
that could work as well.
which,
I was also thinking the speed of it. Like if it's just they could become custodians for the sale, that's
yeah,
possibly a quicker
but if they
process.
do
Which
run it well, and like
yeah,
if the I don't these sanctions are unlikely to be lifted
oh
anytime
no,
soon.
that's what I was
Um,
thinking. Is that
if
like
it could be until the end of next season, and if the status quo works, Chelsea's not relegated, still performing well on the pitch, and it gives them time to come up with a plan like the one I'm suggesting. Like they could
yeah,
just
yeah,
be like, why don't we just own Chelsea? Sure, we're not a super duper club, like, but we can still be a big club with this model because there are models of it on the continent that
yeah, yeah,
exist,
yeah,
and we would be one of the few English clubs. We would be the last big English club to do it. Um, and then they could, because original money uh was like promised to charities, they could basically go something like, okay, a certain amount of our match day revenue will go towards, ongoing charities in the Red Cross in
yeah, yeah,
Ukraine, because even after the war, their country will need help for many years to
yeah,
help
yeah, exactly.
rebuild and whatnot. And they could definitely, commit to doing a lot of the good work in that regard. Um, yeah, and it would be a new identity. It wouldn't be Chelsea Inc., which is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
Roman Abramovich has made the most. And like it would be also up to the supporters what that identity of Chelsea is, like what that club is all about. I don't know if you have the same people wanting to stay. I don't know if Marina, there's people in Chelsea who've been around for, decades and make the club what it is, would stay
yeah,
under that structure because they would be some of the most highly sought after football officials in the world,
yeah,
I think. Um, but Chelsea wouldn't be a poor club by any stretch of the imagination. They would have funding and skill skill access to skilled people they could bring in. I mean, I think John Terry is the president of the Chelsea pitch owners.
yeah.
Um,
That
so,
sounds
so
right. I might be wrong, but it sounds right.
so there's people connected to the club from coaching all the way, players, ex-coaches, who could come in and make something like that. Like they would be very Bayern, Real Madrid, Barcelona, where it's all
Yeah,
in the family. Everybody's somebody who's either been a player or a something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So it could definitely. work. And heck, this model, Chelsea could even end up being a multi-sport team, multi-sport organization in
Yeah,
southeast
yeah,
London, southwest London. Sorry, I should say.
yeah, yeah. And you are
And
right. Is John Terry is the current president, and most of the previous, a lot of previous players, shareholders, along with like previous managers as well. So Frankie Lampard, even Conte and Mourinho are shareholders in
yeah,
the Pitch Owners Association. Yeah, PLC.
yeah. There's plenty of people who I think
Mm.
the talent they could attract, and and I think like I said, it's a good interim solution, and it's a possibility. Like Chelsea, as fans, you are no longer worried about what is the next owner going to be like and what are they going to do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
but we can actually put a bid in and look to buy the club. Who knows what the political situation will be then? But it's always like the I don't think the people in charge of parliament are going to be too worried about annoying a billionaire from Russia
yeah,
who claimed he didn't care about the money.
yeah, yeah,
Right, like, and to be fair, I do believe Roman Abramovich cares more about his legacy at Chelsea than the money, quote unquote,
yeah, yeah,
money. And if Chelsea were to be sold to the supporters club, that does secure his legacy. He's turned Chelsea into a multinational brand and given it, quote unquote, given it back to the fans. Like that's how it'll be spun in the
yeah,
end.
yeah,
And if that does happen, yeah, like I say, that was my thing where I'm going like that's is an opportunity. I think something Chelsea fans could talk about doing, and they're like Chelsea fans are in a unique position where they actually hold a lot more power to do this than, for example, Manchester United fans
yeah,
or Liverpool fans, for that matter.
yeah. Well, exactly.
Um, I think even in its heyday, when Manchester United before the Glaziers took over, shareholders United managed at most to collect 5% of Manchester United's total shares,
All right. Yeah, yeah,
because the club fans have tried for ages to try and turn Manchester United and at least own enough shares of Manchester United that it'll never be taken over by a quote unquote billionaire type who just comes in and runs everything.
yeah,
Um, yeah, which unfortunately didn't work. But for Chelsea, they could definitely set that up. Like there are definitely downsides to this model of running a club. For every Bayern, there's like three or four Schalkes, right? The
yeah,
clubs, you're not guaranteed to be successful. You're not guaranteed. Like Schalke is one of the biggest memberships of any German football club, and they still got relegated. So badly run, fan groups can badly run a football club as just as much as a billionaire can. Um, you you just have better processes usually to keep things running properly.
yeah,
Um, and at the end of the day, if that does happen, like if you're a fan-owned club like that and you get relegated or you have bad decisions made, like nobody goes, but the fans don't deserve it. You're like, yeah, well, fans own this club, so
yeah,
enough of them didn't vote for it. Like, enough of them are dumb enough to think that was a bad idea, or they voted for people who made bad
yeah, yeah,
decisions. Like you could go, while you could criticize as much as you want the previous regime that were in charge of Barcelona, then they got voted in twice
yeah,
by the fan groups. Yeah, Barca fans can't complain. They voted these guys in. Like, yeah, United fans can complain. We don't have any say over what the Glaziers do.
yeah, exactly.
Um, But yeah, and those models have their issues with with the political side of things. You have elections, you have all these other things.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, it can cause divided fan bases to occur.
Yeah, it can, and anything that has elections and things like that, it can lead to shorter term horizons in terms of um, strategy and goals. But you're just worried about people become worried about keeping the position, not about long term futures. So
To
it can
be
be a bit
Yeah,
um,
and to be
populist.
fair, the most of the times, like we look at the example of Barcelona, sure, they had a bad ownership, bad regime in charge for the last few years, which led to their financial troubles. Most of those financial troubles were caused by the fact that they were trying to upgrade to a new stadium, which is also what Real Madrid are doing. So
Yeah,
so it's not like they're the only people. Like every super club in Europe is looking to upgrade to a newer and more modern stadium.
yeah, yeah,
Munich didn't need to do that because they moved into the Allianz Arena in 2006.
yeah,
Um, but a lot of clubs, Barcelona and Real Madrid, are paying it out of their own pockets. They're not taking, sure they're
yeah,
taking loans and stuff, but it's being done out of their own pockets. They're not quote unquote taking like taxpayer money to do it, like a lot of like American teams do,
yeah,
build these facilities, and they are, for for these two clubs, they thought that that was the next step forward to take them to the next level. And then COVID hit. So,
yeah,
so Barcelona, the reason why these people were reelected is not that the people who were members of Barcelona Football Club were stupid. It's because they were earning a lot of money for Barcelona and they were being successful.
yeah, yeah,
And these were the guys who finally put a sponsor on this shirt, which was a very divisive issue in
yeah,
because before that, Barcelona were paying UNICEF to put the UNICEF logo and promote UNICEF on their shirt.
yeah,
So they weren't like earning any money for that. Like they were paying money, they were donating money to do that. Um, then now they're Airways and or Qatar Airways, and then Rakuten.
yeah, yeah,
So like that was a divisive situation, and the so you knew that the club did it. Like it's a lot of those things. Like that's not Barcelona's values, and like they stopped taking more and more. They just stopped taking players from their youth academies and just kept trying to buy stars to solve problems quickly,
yeah, exactly.
and you could see it happening. Now they've got a great bunch of youth players who, when they need it, like that seems to be Barca's superpower, to just generate like a great group of guys just as they need it, like out of nowhere, like
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that
Just
being, uh, and like probably they're gonna be fine. So that's arguably the worst case sort of. That's probably the best outcome you can get, like to be like Barcelona, because I don't. Chelsea can't do Bayern Munich. They're not going to be the biggest club in the country. That
no, no.
ship has sailed.
Yeah,
They can be a Barcelona, because Barcelona and Real Madrid, and I believe Atleti Bilbao and Rayo Vallecano are the four clubs that are owned by socios still.
all right.
And by law, the other clubs all have to be limited liability companies with shares
All
or
right, yeah,
on the
yeah,
stock market, to make sure they're run properly like a business.
yeah.
The Yeah, so yeah, that could be an interesting more. But what were your thoughts as a Chelsea fan as that was happening and reading through the
As I was reading through it, I mean, yeah, it was a bit crazy, and there was a lot of, especially as we get to the bits of what the actual sanctions mean, and especially the can't sell match day tickets going forward. That
Yeah,
is definitely a scary thought because yeah,
yeah,
likelihood of receivership is higher. Then I'd hope that we could make our way somewhat through this
yeah. Like
season without that, but
they can't even borrow money
no,
because that's a loan contract which they can't
yeah,
sign.
we can't sign them. Yeah, so yeah, I'm hopeful we won't go into receivership whilst the season's going on, and I'm a little bit hopeful that the way the things the UK government has said about not wanting to disrupt football and seeing that football is a English way of life and they don't want to hurt the fans,
Hmm.
that they, as long as the board of Chelsea could put proposals to the government showing how Abramovich is not benefiting or things, then we could continue to do stuff that would keep us away from receivership. Because I think
Yeah.
they could argue that that is hurting the fan because it hurts Chelsea next year, and ideally
Or
we'll be sold before then, so Abramovich is getting nothing out of it. I
yeah.
think that's the big
And also, very importantly, no money from Abramovich is going into the club
yeah,
as a money washing
which
situation.
yeah is a bit more of a troubling thing because that's where any shortfalls were picked up. But I think at least for the rest of this season, that's probably not that big a deal. Um, as long as we can get some revenue from merchandise and match day tickets and things, which would require something to show it. Which is why I'm thinking the CPO and the CST taking over as interim is a way to split that out and say, look, Abramovich is getting none of this money because he's no longer if ownership comes to us, we sort it out, and then the long term ownership is just a question that we can just kick the can down the road till the end of the season, and we can sort it
Yeah.
out over time, and not have to worry about the spectre of Abramovich and having to prove every time how money's not going to him. Um, how
But
that,
how does a
yeah,
prospective owner buy Chelsea? Because the money's not going to Abramovich. Like,
it
does he
wasn't
like
meant to be going to him. So, but that was the question: is that there is
do
no
they go
clear,
and donate them and put $3 billion to the Red Cross and like you now owe Chelsea? Like, how does this work? Like this
yeah,
transaction,
it is not defined, and that's
it is
part
not
of the issue.
defined, right?
Yeah,
And like the whole thing is like they can't put that money into an account belonging to Roman Abramovich or that trust,
no,
charitable trust. I assume that's under sanction as well.
yeah, yeah.
So how does that transaction happen? Like, even yeah, what's the license? What are the conditions?
I did have something pointed out to me today, which as soon as it was said to me, I was like, yeah, there's an even bigger ambiguity in the whole thing. Because Abramovich said that the proceeds would go to a charity to look after the victims of the Ukraine conflict.
Mm,
Someone at work, one of the Arsenal fans there, pointed out that nothing in that said Ukrainians. It's
yep.
just victims of the war, or victims of the conflict in Ukraine, or the Ukrainian conflict. So there's actually ambiguity there about exactly who it's going to, because depending on what side of the coin he wants to land on, that there's a wide range of people that could count as. It could count as him if he really wanted to. He's now a victim of it because he got sanctioned. So yeah, there's a
Is
lot
it
of
okay to I think okay as a exercise we could say okay, for example, donating to UNHCR,
yeah,
UNICEF, or Red Cross, the government will probably go, yeah, okay, that's
yeah,
fine. Donating to Ukrainian hospitals and like food banks in there will probably go, okay, that's fine
yeah,
too. Um, like, oh yeah, are you donating to Russian veteran groups
yeah.
to
No, no, no.
soldiers who are injured? Are you donating money to food banks in Moscow because things are
Yeah,
getting expensive for Russian people to buy? And yeah, they are victims of the war too. I'm
yeah.
not
But I
saying
think
they're having it anywhere near as bad as people
no.
actually receiving the shelling, of course.
I
Um,
think at this point in time, that would be seen in the UK as
that would be seen
no.
as undermining the sanctions
Yeah,
on Russia, right? Like that,
yeah.
I can't see that being
I could
allowed.
I can imagine saying you've earmarked that for that purpose after the war has ended and sanctions are lifted on ordinary people, that it's
Yeah,
going to alleviate any suffering that's happening to ordinary Russians. Maybe that's okay. Like, yeah, it's
yeah,
going to sit in a bank account, and when you allow it to happen, it can be
yeah,
extra money going to that purpose of, hey, ordinary Russians are also having it pretty poor, especially the ones speaking out against the war.
yeah,
Um, you know, here is this is what this money's for, and that might be okay. And I think the move to put the sanctions on, um, whilst was politically charged as well. Like a bit of that as well was that like the UK government not wanting to have control on exactly what donated to victims of the conflict in Ukraine meant. And if they move from sanctions, now they actually have full control over who the money goes to. Because in the license to operate, they've taken away, yeah,
Mm.
there's no selling. So they can't, technically, the club can't be sold currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, the license to operate says it can't be sold. It's explicitly, no, you can't sell the club. Uh,
Yeah.
but the UK government did also sort of put a side note out, which is in the in terms of selling, if you came, we would be open to an update to the um, charter if you have a plan. So pretty much tell us who's buying it and how it's all happening, and we'll sign that off or not. So
Yeah.
that to
And
me was
that's
the big
not going
clearly
to be a
bit.
short process either.
No, which
And
is why
I
I'm
doubt the
hoping.
government will approve of anything like that while till the season is over. And also,
Oh,
to get all those things in place, legal fees,
yeah, yeah.
whatnot,
I
is
think they would
not a
approve
cheap
it.
matter.
Yeah, I think they would approve it if it could be very easily shown exactly where it's going. Yep, it's a donation to to the Red Cross. Yeah.
Yeah.
$3 billion to the Red Cross. That is the thing. Nothing else. Everything. I'll sign documents. There is no money owed to me anymore. It's done. In which case, that might. I mean, something like that might be a nice shortcut
Or
to it.
even if
But
the
even that requires lawyers to
if
sort it out.
even if let me spitball here, if the interim solution was that uh, the Chelsea pitch owners and the or the CST or the pair of them were
Mm.
custodians of the club till the end of the season, i.e., they were allowed to sell match day tickets, collect their match day revenue from TV rights. Though I think that is still allowed. I'm not. Don't
I
quote me on
think
that.
I think
Sell
because it's
merchandise.
I think yeah, TV rights must be okay because it's an already agreed
It's already
upon
pre-signed.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, if they're allowed to now get match day revenue, earn money through Instagram, social media, all
yeah,
these other things, all these other good things that you need to run the club going, and the CPO overlooks that they run it. It's all coming through their bank accounts.
yeah,
If that money is handed to them to donate to charities with
yeah,
the approval of the government, like, okay, we're gonna give 100 mil to the Red Cross,
yeah,
done, signed check, we've approved this, we're gonna give blah 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 blah. Like, sure, they'll might be taking a million or two for admin because they need to hire accountants and things to
yeah,
make
yeah,
sure these transactions get done properly. So there is always administrative costs.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
These guys are not experts at this, so they
Yeah,
obviously need time to learn it and
and
all
need
that. So
lawyers and
all
stuff.
need to get paid, yeah,
Well,
and
the C,
bring in
the,
experts to do the things properly.
I think the Pitch Owners Association would be pretty reasonably
Yeah, I
well
think
set up
Pitch
for it.
Owners
Yeah,
is a reasonable organization for it, and
yeah,
it makes sense that if they were to end up, if they are custodians of that fund,
yeah,
because they have to kind of keep a separate book. Like, this money is for charity, not to be used, because Fish Owners Association have a running business because they're repaying the debt Chelsea accrued in the Ken Bates era
yeah,
regarding the property. And the reason why they bought the pitch and the stadium is because it was being sold to property developers to make flats. There's a whole, you probably know the story better than I do, but yeah, the whole situation meant that they took on the debt from
yeah,
the banks, and they're slowly repaying it with shareholders and people, and people buying paying the fees and everything like that. This So they have to obviously separate the two. This money can't be used to pay for that.
yeah, yeah. It would there would
And
have to be those separations, and which is why it
yeah,
would sort of if it was a CPO and the CST as a new deal, and then that would make sense. But then it would be separate from the two of them as well because they'll just be shareholders in the new entity or in
yeah.
the thing that's it's doing. But yeah, in the consortium.
Be like a CFC charitable trust, for example. Just spitballing here. They created a new entity that's owned and run by the CPO and has people from the CST in there, because I'm sure there's a cross-section membership of those two organizations anyway,
Yeah.
a huge
Oh, big,
cross-section.
huge cross section.
So definitely, um, that could work. And like the sheer amount of money here means they're gonna have to constantly show that they've dotted their T, yeah, crossed their T's, dotted their I's, and it's is actually this money is being, sent where it's said to be sent.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that could be a way to avoid receivership. I think realistically, unless somebody is feeling really lucky and just going, yep, here, 2.5 billion, I will prove this, blah, blah, blah. And because it was meant to be a charity, I propose I have my own fund, it'll go into this, I'm proving it, I'm
yeah,
setting
yeah,
it up.
yeah, yeah,
And by all means, the British government can run this fund, pay, use the money I've put in this fund to set up to run it and make sure the money goes to the right people,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
whatever. Because it's officially going to become one of the largest charities in the world, like, like
Instantaneous.
instantaneously.
Yes, exactly. Whatever this charity is, whatever however they do it, it's just yeah, yeah. Have two odd
Even with
billion
$1
dollars.
billion, it's gonna be one of
Yeah,
the, which is why I think in this situation, even if the government if Abramovich agrees that something like the Twitch owners and the CST are can quote unquote own the club for $1 billion, and this
yeah,
money doesn't have to be paid right away up front. It can be a loan, quote unquote, interest free, because
yeah,
the CPO are already paying back a debt, and this is an interest free debt. Um, and basically, the terms and conditions is whatever, like maybe something like 10% of match day revenue and 10% of TV rights revenue, and
yeah, yeah,
prize, prize pool revenue goes towards, or even 10% of gross revenue for the club before you take anything out,
yeah,
has to be put into this charitable trust for ongoing, charities in Ukraine and charitable activities,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, till X
They
number of years, like,
they could even sell through the Barcelona route and not have a shirt sponsor and have their charity as the shirt sponsor because Three's suspended their sponsorship
yeah,
anyway. So
yeah,
they could go that route, be like, and that would shirt sponsor for the next whatever 5 years, 10 years, whatever the period of time needs to be to fulfill the monetary side of it as well. It's like, well,
yeah,
yeah, we have the charity's name on the shirt for as long as that we are paying that, doing
yeah.
that thing.
And that can be renegotiated if getting a sponsor means a charity gets more money that year
Yeah, yeah.
for things like, spitballing, obviously, here.
Well, that could
Um,
be up to the charity, right? The charity could then
yeah.
on sell the rights
Mm,
in year blocks or 3 year blocks or whatever, and they get the shirt sponsorship money for on selling it. So it's actually their
yeah.
something they have control over. Then, like either it's the charity's name up there, or they on sell it to some other company, and that name goes up there. But the money doesn't go to Chelsea; the money goes to the charitable trust or that charity.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that, like I said, I like this idea. It's obviously, I don't know how plausible it is, but I don't think it's been more plausible to do something like this at Chelsea than now,
Yeah,
or will ever be, for that
yeah, yeah.
matter.
I say I'm hopeful that the interim solution with the CPO and the CST sort of at least can be set up to allow us to continue running as a club for the season. But I do like this model as an ongoing one, where it's you say it's brought from a set up a charitable trust that you know technically it's a loan, but not really. It's just we're going to pay money into that over time, and that's the
Yeah.
the 3 billion because it's going there.
Yeah.
and
Or maybe not even
yeah,
3 billion, even like
whatever it is.
for
Yeah,
5 years, if it's $1 billion will add up, over time. Like,
yeah,
that's reasonable.
yeah.
And Chelsea
I was
Supporters
just
Club
using
could decide
Abramovich's
to
number.
continue doing that relationship with the charity, going, yep, that's part of our club identity now. We do this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like I'm not saying that'll happen. I'm just saying like that could end up being a thing.
It
And
could be a
like
thing.
Roman
Yeah,
Abramovich, I think would be even more favorable or something like 'cause that even makes his legacy at Chelsea even better.
yeah,
Chelsea fans can do all the things that Barca fans did back in the day. Like it's more than just a club.
yeah. We'll be the new Barcelona.
uh, be careful what you wish for there, huh?
Yeah, I guess yeah that might be a multi-sided edge sword there.
Yep, yep. But yes, a supporter-owned bid for Chelsea.
Not as an ongoing thing as such, but more as the interim solution, and then setting up the process by like, or we'll have setting up the trust.
Yeah,
Well, setting up a charity that's then going to thing and be like, and then
yeah,
managing the sale process. But I imagined
yeah.
that someone else would buy it off them, not that they would just
Mm,
be like, well, actually, we're going to put, let's say, 10%, 15% of revenue into that charity and pay off and the sale price gets sold out over 10 years or 7 years or whatever time period it works out at, which is actually a pretty interesting way of doing it. And then, yeah, just leverage, say 40% stock
And
in the
because they're
free
in
market
charge of
or,
the charity, if they're having a particularly bad year where they can't afford to, and they're
yeah,
making actual losses, like a gross loss, I'm meaning,
yeah,
not a net loss, um, then the charity, they won't be needing to donate that money to the charity.
yeah, they can just
Um,
extend because it's more.
Extend the payout period. Yeah,
Yeah, extend the period. Like we can't, the charity. We need to pay the charity until X number of dollars has been paid to the
yeah,
charity, and then after that is as I say, it could be an ongoing thing or not, but there's
yeah,
a X amount that has to be paid. If we charity votes to extend that by to not take the money this year and be like, well, next year we just continue on and everything gets extended out the year, then so be it. And if it happens to be all the same people once again, oh well, so be it. That's just how it goes. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think with that being said, that's all we have time for today. Fine.
Yeah. Yes, and hopefully a little bit in chat as well on the Discord.
Yeah, yeah. Hope you all have enjoyed. And keep safe, and we will hear from you all next time.
Catch you later.